Hello, this is Dread, and in today's video topic, we are going to be going over my attempts at trying to push attack speed to its absolute limit. So, normally, when it comes to Last Epoch, I don't really get off on the normal stuff anymore. Much like a man who has grown his tastes, I also do not really get off on, vanilla builds as much, right? Like, yes, I could be pushing like 4,000 plus corruption with a build that like off screens everything, right? I could be doing that. But I also could be in the 1600s scraping barnacles off the bottom of a ship, and I don't know which one would be more fun. And that's like the thing. I've been playing Last Epoch for a long enough time now where I have dominated the game. I don't necessarily need to like do the most broken shit constantly because I did do the most broken shit constantly. I've done more broken shit than like anyone has ever done in Last Epoch, at least for the majority of people, as I've been here since the beginning. And trust me, if you think all the stuff that you see now is broken, just Death Seal used to be probably one of the strongest skills of all time, by the way. Death Seal was pretty stupid back in the day. But yeah, speaking of all that, let's talk about attack speed, shall we? If you haven't already, I'd heavily suggest leaving a like on the video and subscribing to the channel if you like talks like this. So the whole concept of this build was built around Tempest Strike. Now, this is not going to be a full build guide as I still have to finish the build, but I want to show you guys what I've been up to. So Tempest Strike was reworked this patch. It was pretty bad up until this patch, and now I would say it is in a redeemable spot. Now, when I saw the skill tree for Tempest Strike, I was very disappointed. I was like, oh no, it's Surfman Strike 2.0. But what really popped it off for me, and what we didn't realize, and sadly you can't really figure this out from just looking at a skill tree, is Tempest Strike becomes one of the crazier skills in Last Epoch because of info that is hidden below the surface. So every single skill in Last Epoch has either a cast rate or, of course, an attack rate. And most skills have close to like a 1.0 attack rate. That means 1 attack per second. Or if you're using something like Warpath, that gets all the way up to 2 attacks per second. That's like the tippity top, right? And Warpath pays a huge penalty for this by having 40% less damage and 40% less ailment application, meaning that 2 attack rate is very important, because let's assume that you're playing Warpath and you have 100% attack speed. Well, instead of going from 1 attacks per second to 2, you go from 2 to 4. Now, Tempest Strike is crazy because it has a 1.8 attack rate. That is ridiculous. And right now, my tooltip is saying that I have 483% attack speed. Now, we also have 40% attack speed plus the 20% inside Tempest Strike's tree. So that's another 60% attack speed. So let's just say, for safekeeping, like 500% attack speed, right? That means that I kind of have like 10 attacks per second, almost 9 to 10 attacks per second. And let me tell you, when you have like that many attacks per second, the game becomes very entertaining. Oh boy, like just watching the animations bug out, just like for reference, right? If I'm just sitting in town and just attacking like the air, I have 260% attack speed. And then of course, when I'm hitting an enemy, I get all my aspect of the shark stacks, I get my war cry stacks, I get everything, right? And I become an absolute typhoon of attack speed. Now, is this actually good? I'm not entirely sure about that. Tempest Strike's tree is what I would call the upper end of mediocre, but with that 1.8 attack rate, it kind of makes up for that, because if you think about it, it just has like 80% more attack speed than like other skills. Now, Swipe, on the other hand, its main competitor that we'll think about, right? That has a 1.6 attack rate. So it's not necessarily better than Swipe in that regard, But there's a lot of fun stuff that you can do with Tempest Strike that you can't necessarily do with Swipe. Like, for instance, trigger tornadoes. This is very important because one of the main things to make a melee skill feel good in Last Epoch is having a source of pull. If you don't know, the normal version of tornado, it actually pulls enemies into you. So for instance, like if you put a tornado down, enemies will be dragged towards the tornado. And since we can create tornadoes with Tempest Strike, that means that we can get a free pull effect in, and we combine that with Warcry and Warcry Totem, and that means that we can suck everything into a small little area, into our melee area. And that makes gameplay significantly better than it ever could be because we are essentially playing basic attack plus. So having all of that extra pull makes the build feel so much better. And we definitely need that, as I will say this is probably one of the worst patches for melee builds of all time. If you don't know, last patch, you could just phase through enemies, and that made melee builds feel absolutely amazing in comparison to now. You'd be able to like maneuver and get out of those AoEs. Sadly, a lot of the end game and challenge in Last Epoch is avoiding the little circles. And sometimes when you're playing a build like Tempest Strike, as you can see on the screen, you don't necessarily have what you would like to call visual clarity. So that means that essentially I need to be able to tank things. And normally I would be able to dodge out of these things very easily because, I just walk through the enemy and all of a sudden I'm out of the AoE because they can't really put AoEs on top of themselves like that, right? Well, the problem is, this patch finally fixed all the rubber banding issues in terms of bosses. So, like, for instance, the Reign of Dragons boss, Emperor of Corpses, he no longer likes to skate around like a schoolgirl. But this has a side effect that when you rub up against a mob, I know, ooh, right? When you rub up against a mob physically, you kind of turn into like molasses in January. Like for some reason, I don't know why, but like I'll walk up to a mob, right? And then as I'm trying to walk around the mob, like the pathfinding just dies. Like it just goes somewhere else. Like I don't know, like on vacation. I really don't know. And this kind of like rubber like rubbing against each other behavior makes melee almost infuriating to play, especially on a class like Beastmaster, which does not have access to stereotypical movement skills like lunge and teleports and stuff like that. Sure, I have Fury Leap, but Fury Leap is, I won't add to that. So that's like the problem with playing melee in this patch, and that makes it so that playing this build isn't necessarily as entertaining as it could be, but having almost 9 to 10 attacks per second definitely makes up for most things. One of the coolest things that I found with this build is if you run a +4 to Tempest Strike and you run like your tree in a very specific way, I can gain the benefits of running the Wind Tempest, right, to get the tornadoes, while also getting the Thunder Tempest in the upper left of the tree, the 40% chance to get a Thunder Tempest when you use a cold or physical skill of cold or physical Tempest, right, which is like the attacks. And that means that not only do I have the suck, but I also have that nice AoE on the lightning, which means that my clear is actually pretty good for a basic attack build. So yeah, and especially when you have this much attack speed, you get plenty of Thunder Tempest. Now, of course, this build is all built around bleed. There'll be a full build guide on this build. Um, Obviously, if you want to see that, I'd heavily suggest subscribing to the YouTube. We're gonna be working on it. I still gotta finish, like, put in the finishing touches. There's a few things I gotta fix about the build. But with all that being said, this has been Dread. I'll have to go do something else. This build will be finished in probably the next few days. Bye.